Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Q49 Podcast, brought to you exclusively by the Hoosier Network. My name is Austin Platt. I'm joined alongside my co-beat reporters Joe Cronin and Nick Rodecap, and joining us once again per request, even though he was somehow sitting here in the dark as we walked into this room, Matt Byrne, everybody from SI.
Yeah. No round of applause? Okay.
Oh, okay. Hey, I'm always ready. I'm always ready.
How did you get in here? When the rest of us were...
I just opened the door.
And then
anyway, I have two things for you this afternoon. The first one is that a coffee is really needed today. Just want to say that.
Okay.
And the second thing is that you cannot put up Christmas decorations or listen to Christmas music before December 1st.
Thank you.
And that is a rule.
Why are you pointing at me for that?
Joe, because you're the one that started arguing about Thanksgiving being like in October.
I've seen some Christmas decorations. It is too early for that. Respect Thanksgiving.
What do you want them to put up? Like the pilgrims and what are those? A kumquat? Like just throw a bunch of kumquats everywhere? You want some squash?
Just wait till December 1st.
Gobble.
That is Christmas season. You can't tell me right now is Christmas season and we're 2 weeks away from Thanksgiving.
I'm not saying it's Christmas season, but like Thanksgiving decorations, like what?
Yeah, nobody decorates for Thanksgiving, but that doesn't mean you should decorate for Christmas in early November.
No, I agree. Rip down the Halloween decorations and just chill. Just relajate.
Well, the reason why coffee might be needed is because Indiana men's soccer played quite the match last night where we were up past all hours writing about it. Indiana defeated Michigan, the 5 seed, 4-3 in the crazy soccer match I think we have all witnessed being on this beat. And what I said last night was the crazy soccer match I had seen since the World Cup final, basically a year ago. Hoosiers win 4-3. Wow, I mean, I'm still speechless.
Oh, yeah.
A little more than 12 hours after the match ended. It was I still don't know what happened, really. Goals were scored, red card, almost a goal from the middle of the pitch, a crazy environment, and a wild ending.
Yeah, I don't think this was the most attended match. I think that one against Washington, especially student-wise, they had, I think it was half of the side of the goal with students for Washington. But this one, there was just an energy. This team was playing well in the past month. The Bloomington faithful was there. I mean, that was something Coach Jakely said. They're always bringing the house there. And then the student energy was something that was so uplifting we talked to Maloon, we talked to Tommy, and then obviously Coach Yeagley, and they all were just like, that was awesome. Like that, just having that kind of atmosphere, especially at college soccer, is something you don't really see at a lot of schools. But like Tommy almost hit like a 50-yard shot in the first half. That would have been insane.
I guess as a media member and us being media members, I don't know about you guys, but kind of rolling up to the match, there was just a really strange vibe at Bill Armstrong. You sort of had the postseason atmosphere there, and you could feel it before the match started, but it wasn't necessarily win or go home for Indiana. So there was kind of straddled in between, and then of course a 7-goal shootout to follow.
Can't complain from it though.
Yeah, especially after following the way this team has been evolving throughout the season. It's like they kind of fit in a missing piece where before they didn't really have any of these slugfests because the offense just wasn't there, but they looked so much more confident last night, and they went toe-to-toe with Michigan. Credit to the Wolverines, too. They responded quickly. The home crowd played a big part of it, but especially in the second half, you thought maybe Michigan had momentum, but IU's offense really took a step forward, and I think you've got to credit the fans with a big part of that.
Wild match. Just an absolute wild match. You mentioned the eeriness. It was strange driving there, and the daylight savings difference was wild. It was pitch black.
Yeah.
Driving up, I was like, I should be leaving right now, and here I am rolling up at 7 o'clock for a match that ended up starting at 8:15 because they were waiting on the first semifinal, which we'll get to.
Another thriller.
That was both matches absolutely crazy. Of course, Penn State won, and penalties, Indiana winning 4-3. Let's talk about the match. Obviously, this is coming off Indiana. They defeated Wisconsin 2-1.
Yeah.
There have been a lot of goals lately. They're all kind of just blend together. In the quarterfinals, which got them to this point, Michigan upset Northwestern. I called it. I went 4 for 4 with my quarterfinal predictions. Good for me. Nobody cares, Austin. Move on. Indiana wins 4-3, 15-13 in shots. They were ahead 3-1 at the half. Michigan with 2 goals, kind of just a wild match with a crazy atmosphere, and it was 70 degrees outside, which I still think blows my mind. But Hoosiers got it done, a late goal from Malone Gumbali in the final 5 minutes or so after Michigan went down to 10 men. The difference, I guess, just your overall opinions on the match. Indiana scoring 4, the offense is there. Defensively, Todd Yeagley said they didn't necessarily play poorly, but it feels like a couple of those goals kind of came out of nowhere.
He said He said we made some interesting decisions. That was the way he kind of described the defense. And he obviously isn't going to throw shade at them. And it is true. You can't just look at the box score, especially in a game of soccer. That doesn't tell the whole story. I mean, you can see Malone Gumbali scoring 2 goals and be like, all right, he had a good game. And he did. But defensively, you give up 3 goals. And one of them was a penalty. And that was I was on the opposite side. I couldn't exactly see where the spot was. They reviewed it for like 3 minutes, it seemed like. It was a long review. But in terms of the match, especially in the second half, that almost felt like Michigan's game to lose. They had all the momentum. They scored the penalty. They had a great equalizing goal. That cross and flick header back was fantastic. Nothing that JT Harms could have done in that situation. And then if it wasn't for Jason Buckner being way too physical, already working with a yellow card that he got in the first 15 minutes of the match, that's the difference maker right there. That place was almost silent after that the equalizing goal that Michigan had. Buckner gets his second yellow off the field, and he had to walk around. Like, he went outside the stadium to go back to the locker room just so he didn't have to walk by the Hoosier Army, by the way. I thought that was hilarious. But the energy was back from that moment, and once the crowd was back into it, just things started to go more towards the Hoosiers' way. And then Bacharach, what a game. Great shot, and then Gumbali is able to follow up with the sniffer and put away the game-winning goal.
This is one of those matches, sort of down the stretch of the season where you look at this result and you just lock it in some box and you just store it away. Because this match, you're not really caring about what the attack is doing. You're not really caring about what you're doing defensively. It almost kind of felt like a match where neither team has control. It's just kind of both teams reacting to just the ensuing chaos. So this wasn't a match. I guess you could look at it and say that, yeah, Indiana gave up 3 goals. Is there room for concern there? But in my opinion, you don't really need to care, because this is more of a match when you're about to enter the NCAA tournament of how much does your team sort of have in terms of resolve and sort of grit to get one of those results. And I think that's kind of the big takeaway for Indiana, is not that they gave up 3 goals or kind of something like that. Because it just kind of had that feel, It's like Indiana in the championship could win 1-0. Like, I think they're just that type of team where the results can really differ so much in the terms of, I guess, kind of how a match plays out.
Well, it's really interesting. You mentioned how this wasn't necessarily a win or go home situation for Indiana, but it was for Michigan. They were playing for their season. They're not. I would be shocked if they ended up being in the NCAA tournament.
No, they're out.
They're done. That was, if they win, they can maybe sneak in if they lose in the Big Ten championship, but a loss and they're done. They're playing for their lives. Indiana is really only playing for better seeding in the tournament. And like you mentioned, the resilience right there to be able to battle through that. Michigan responded pretty much every single call that Indiana had when things were seemingly to get out of hand. I mean, it was 3-1 at the half, and they brought it back to 3-3. And it just that final goal was a sigh of relief. Like, okay, we were able to battle through that. Now, look at this. Now that Big Ten championship is going to have a little more weight. You're playing potentially for that national seed and so on.
And that's where experience really goes a long way. IU, success is this program's middle name. Michigan, on the other side, they had a freshman goalkeeper in Isaiah Goldson who was fantastic when he could be, but IU's attack was just so constant that he never really got a break. IU's no stranger to big moments, to big environments. Todd Yeagley, success is his middle name. A lot of the guys who took the lead last night are veterans. Hugo Bacharach, Malone Gumbali, Tommy Mahalik, they've all been in these spots before, and it's very easy in a big environment where the stakes are high as far as, well, the crowd is concerned anyway. It's very easy to let the moment take over and sort of get out of rhythm. But IU was able to maintain their composure, and I think that was the big difference. They've been in this spot so many times before that they knew exactly what to do.
It feels kind of strange to think now 7 straight years this team has been in the Big Ten championship. It's just something like you ask Todd Yeagley, and he tries to take it for granted, but it's so difficult because they're in this situation every year. They find a way to get goals, and obviously the guys who scored had struggled really throughout the season. Tommy Mahalik has led the team in shots. He's been waiting for that moment of his, and sure, he scored against Trine in kind of a put-back, tap-in-ish goal where he kind of didn't even celebrate because he kind of knew a huge weight was lifted off his shoulders. But that goal last night, which was the third of the match right before halftime, was such a huge boost because Indiana won a couple free kicks at that point, and the clock had stopped. Sarver took it. It was saved by Goldston, but then he said there were like 5 guys there, and he was just the one that was lucky enough to be there and smashed it in the back of the net. And at that point, I think we all thought Indiana was kind of clear, smooth sailing, just kind of coast to the finish line and see out the second half in front of an awesome environment. But as we said, Michigan, a team that had sat back and soaked a lot of Indiana's pressure in the regular season match where Indiana had 20 shots or something and couldn't find the back of the net. That was probably the most frustrating match of the entire year, even though they got a point out of it. That was the beginning of Big Ten play when I think there was the third Big Ten match where at that point I was like, okay, Indiana's really going to need to turn their season around. And what do you know? They did just that. So now, I guess if we look forward, considering we've basically dissected everything in that match as possible, Hoosiers host Penn State on Sunday, noon, what will be the craziest day, I think, in the entire IU athletics calendar. This is the wildest week. Every Tuesday,
the equinox of Indiana sports.
That's true. We had sports equinox last week. Tuesday was the men's basketball opener. Last night, Wednesday, soccer. Tonight, women's basketball. Friday night, volleyball is back in town.
Saturday, football.
And also women's soccer. They play tomorrow in the NCAA tournament.
Goodness.
They're back in the big dance for the first time in 10 years. Saturday, obviously, IU football. And then Sunday, the Big Four. Both men's, women's basketball, soccer, volleyball.
Look at that. What a time to be alive.
Yeah, wow.
I'm going to use a sports quote and say this is what you come to Indiana sports media for.
we don't come here to play school.
Call it the litmus test of IU sports media. But no, this is it seems like these two teams have been on a collision course over the last couple of weeks. And there's history here between IU and Penn State, specifically in the Big Ten championship. Now, in recent years, IU has largely had Penn State's number, but the last time these two teams met in the Big Ten championship in 2021, Penn State won 3-0. That game, though, was at Penn State. This one's in Bloomington. That's a huge advantage for IU.
We all know what happened the year before that. Indiana beat Penn State in the spring of 21. Not even the year before that. It was like 6 months before that. It was kind of crazy.
Yeah.
That whole kind of just basically 2 seasons almost blended into one. The Hoosiers got the better of the Nittany Lions and penalty kicks with Roman Celentano, and now they hope JT Harms can make some big plays. Obviously, Chris Shakes made the big penalty save last night to more or less end Ohio State's run and the top 2 seeds, which is what the Big Ten wanted in a year where Maryland not being in the tournament, of course, a big loss if you're thinking for the conference and for the big names for men's soccer being in. I think this is probably the best result they could have possibly gotten. And of course, we know that the crowd last night, fantastic. You would hope the one Sunday at noon is going to be just as good. I don't know what the weather looks like. It might rain this weekend. I'm not entirely sure. But you would think Sunday at noon, kind of week before Thanksgiving, everyone could be, I don't know, you don't really have exams, though, this upcoming week, do you? Not really?
I don't know.
So.
Some people, if it's a class without exams, some people are doing their projects this week. But because of the men's basketball game being at 7 p.m., women's on the road, is it noon? Is that the
noon
kick? Yeah.
So a noon kickoff for soccer. I think it's gonna be buzzing there. I think a night game would have been really cool. I think that just would have been a really awesome atmosphere to have. But I think they didn't want to take away, obviously, the culture of basketball here is otherworldly. So I do think it will be buzzing.
Well, the glaring storyline is that when Indiana went to Penn State, sort of that 2-1 victory is what sort of kicked off this late season run. Indiana won 4 in a row then lost to Northwestern and is on another 4-game win streak right now. And there's sort of different players that are contributing sort of in each, in that first win streak, it was definitely Sam Sarver, Hugo as well, Carson as well, and now it's Maloon and Tommy in this second 4-match winning streak. Tommy and Maloon have scored 6 of the team's 12 goals in that span, and that's all from trying afterward. So those two players have picked up 6 goals since October 27th. So it's Indiana's attack just getting more channels, I guess sort of spreading the wealth in that regard, and now it's kind of paying dividends with Indiana being able to rely on more people.
I think the depth of the attack, like obviously that defense has played it's been strong all year long. Joey Mayer is the anchor, and JT Harms has been pretty prolific. Actually had some huge saves in that game against Michigan. Michigan scored 3 goals, and they could have easily had 4 or 5.
Both teams.
Yeah,
we could have seen 10 goals last night.
Oh my
easily.
gosh.
I mean, Mahalik hit the crossbar from 3 yards out.
We were spoiled with 7. There could have been even more than that, but I think with just the attacking pressure, there's been a little bit of lapse in some of the counterattack defense. And it was something that Coach Yeagley mentioned before the Wisconsin match, and that was how Wisconsin got their goal. And then Michigan, they adjusted not even 90, I think it was 67 seconds after 67 seconds after the opening goal. They go down, and none other than Jason Buckner torches Alex Barger on that right wing. And he's a good player. I mean,
he had a good finish.
He's got to figure out some keeping his head screwed on and not allowing a student section of 1,500 to get under his skin. It's easier said than done. Easier said than done, respectfully. But he had a good move down that wing, and it's just moments like that where they're putting so much pressure on other teams' defense, but once that defense can get out into their form, spread out quickly, now you're going to be able to put a little 4-on-3 fast break because BB likes to work up, Barger likes to work up, and Joey Mayer, Jansen Miller, they've been great. They're not the fastest players. So when other teams' wings are working down, it's going to be a little tougher for them to track back with the outside backs trying to fill into their spot. I don't know.
Awkward pause. Nobody wanted to jump.
I'm trying to think of how Penn State could exploit that. I mean, you look at their talent top to bottom. I mean, they've got Peter Mangione, Big Ten Offensive Player of the Year. Femi Awodesu, Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year. And, of course, their final line of defense, Chris Shakes, Big Ten Goalkeeper of the Year. IU has their work cut out for them. And Michigan made IU pay for those mistakes. You think of the goal that was scored as a result of Barger being a little bit out of position. That's not the first time that's happened, where he just gets a little over anxious. I think it happened against Washington, too. That ended up being the game winner in that match. It comes from, I think, a place where you get a little bit too overeager. And Tommy Mahalik kind of talked about it. It's picking and choosing your moments, knowing when to step up, knowing when to step back. And that's where that experience comes in. So I think Indiana absolutely has to iron those things out, because Penn State is a team where Michigan maybe failed to capitalize on a couple of occasions, thanks in large part to JT Harms. Penn State's going to step on the gas, and they're going to step on IU's throat. If IU even gives an inch, they'll take a mile.
I mean, it kind of seems like regardless of the result that, I don't know, there just seems like there's a vibe that Indiana doesn't really have much pressure going into the NCAA tournament. I mean, even if Indiana wins the Big Ten double, that probably means, 14 through 16 national seed? And I mean,
I'd say higher.
Okay, but still.
Meaning the number is lower.
but still, it's not like Indiana's one of like the top 5 seeds, and I guess is going to kind of have that pressure. And even if Indiana loses to Penn State, that still takes off the pressure. So I think that Indiana is in a pretty favorable spot to make another run in the NCAA tournament. Obviously, this team is not foreign to big environments. Obviously, that Syracuse match last year, and I think that is kind of another storyline. I mean, just in the Big Ten tournament, the storyline is the Indiana-Penn State. That's what started the run. And then the NCAA tournament storyline is that this Michigan game, kind of last night, I don't know, it kind of had national championship feel to the Syracuse match, kind of back and forth, so much anxiety. So Indiana kind of already has that under their belt, and now it's just, can they take that experience from last year? And I don't know, I guess it's kind of a gift that match happened that match happened before the NCAA tournament. So it's just, can Indiana use those experiences to get those big wins down the stretch and win the big one.
Oh yeah, I mean, people love talking like parity, seeing not the top seeds in the final, and that's just the way sports are. But there really isn't a better 1 versus 2 that you could draw up. I mean, these are the top 2 scoring offenses in the Big Ten, and they're the top 2 defenses in the Big Ten. And Penn State has the best keeper. They had the best defensive player and the best offensive player. And then all around, Indiana's offense through October looked like one of the best in the Big Ten with overall play between Sarver, Bacharach, and then when Malone and Mahalik started to find their form. So I think either way, we're in store for a fantastic game, whether it's 1-0 or 4-3. I don't know if we'll get a 4-3 again just because some of the caliber of that Penn State back line, and especially with Shakes in the net, but I don't know. You never know. I mean, I don't think we were expecting 4-3 against Michigan. That was 0-0 draw early in the year back in September. It was ugly, too. And then that was the biggest explosion of goals we've had all year.
I think something that I forget who said it last night, it may have been Todd Yeagley at the end, kind of talked about hunger. It's always kind of who wants it more. And I think last night, certainly Indiana wanted it more. And I think that was a result not only of the crowd, but the fact that they were up a man late and kind of told themselves, well, even though we might not have the momentum, because of course Michigan scored twice, they found a way to get one before having to worry about extra time or penalty kicks. This is, I think, for Penn State this entire year, this has been kind of a revenge season almost. Last year, they basically had their entire, a lot of their returners from the team that won the Big Ten tournament 2 seasons ago against Indiana. Peter Mangione returns. He's kind of been the top guy up front. You mentioned of the 5, the 5 main awards the Big Ten hands out, Penn State has 4 of them. Goalkeeper, defense, forward, Coach.
Jeff Cook.
Yeah. Who had a fantastic year. So it's just crazy to think that after last year where they finished 5th in the Big Ten, lost to Indiana at Bill Armstrong Stadium in the first round of the in the quarters of the Big Ten tournament, here they face off again. And this is basically the same squad that 2 years ago was fantastic. They got upset, I'm pretty sure, in the NCAA tournament that year, 2 seasons ago. They lost like Hofstra, was it?
Oh my gosh!
Wasn't that like the 8-1
that was like
game?
The 8-2 game. Hofstra won. Oh my gosh! Yeah,
that was a baseball score.
You saying that brought me back. That was oh my gosh! And Hofstra was up like 6-0 at one point.
It was crazy. They went up a
strange.
touchdown.
Taking a look at the time capsule.
That was
8-2.
That was crazy.
8-2.
That's oh my lord.
Happy Valley.
Yeah. No, that was
Penn State was a national seed.
That was insane.
Penn State was a national seed, right? Were they?
I don't know.
Maybe.
But still, it's still an upset.
I would think.
No, I think they were, though. I think
Hofstra
they were. I think that was the big thing.
3 minutes in, and then they scored 3 goals in less than 15 minutes of game time.
That's pretty wild.
That is incredible.
But anyway, I think that's, kind of what I was just saying just now. Maybe I didn't phrase it that well, but it's just that if Indiana does lose on Sunday, I don't really think that there's any negative outlook for this team. You have to remember that last year, Indiana lost 3-1 in the Big Ten championship and then goes on an NCAA tournament run. This team has scored 12 goals in the past 4 matches. Maybe the back line hasn't been superb compared to earlier in the year, but regardless, the attack is made up for it. So it kind of seems like either way that if Indiana wins the Big Ten tournament title on Sunday, then there's so much momentum going into the NCAA tournament, and there's still this sort of we still have stuff to prove kind of mentality. At least that's the vibe of it. And then if Indiana loses, it's still the same way of just coming back and being hungry, kind of as you said. So there doesn't really seem like, at least for the first few rounds, that there's any sort of shakiness with Indiana.
That was something interesting when Coach Yeagley was like, we have not even capped yet. That was what he said. And this team is still growing. And they have looked in tremendous form, especially on offense. And he really was talking, it stemmed about Hugo. He was talking they have not tapped into his full potential yet at the center mid because he's only been in that spot for a month. And he's looked very solid. He's created a ton of chances. He's scored and assisted against Michigan. And his shot was a rocket. Oh, my gosh. On the left foot, too. And that's how he set up that Malone game-winning goal. He had another... he had to reach out on a left foot shot. Goldson got to it, and Malone was able to just sniff it away. But it's moments like that where Bacharach and Patty have now worked together. They've gelled. in just a very short amount of time in the midfield, where in the first month of the season, the midfield was that biggest question mark of why is this team not able to possess in the midfield when they have guys like Sarver and Mahalik and Gumbali, and the way Oduro started his season and everything like that. They weren't able to create offense. Now you add a guy like Bacharach. Patty's been stepping up in a huge way, and that has just, you've seen an exponential increase in the production.
I think there was a Penn State match. Sarver scored twice, and they were both set up by
Hugo.
It was Bacharach. Okay,
Yeah.
It was Hugo. So those two had quite a nice kind of 1-2 going, and that was, you mentioned it, the turning point of Indiana's season. All right, let's look now ahead to NCAA tournament implications. Matt, you and I have discussed how we kind of always thought that, I thought that Indiana was in the NCAA tournament no matter what happened in this conference tournament. I thought even if they lost to Wisconsin, they'd be safe. You disagreed, but we did come to the agreement that a win last night, we think, secures Indiana a home match in the NCAA tournament. If they lose Sunday, it would be in the first round next Thursday, a week from now when we're recording, November the 16th. And if they win, Yeagley, the rest of the crew, are pretty confident that the tournament committee would have no choice other than to seed Indiana, which means they'd have the bye and wouldn't play until Sunday the 19th in 10 days. They'd have a nice little break.
Yeah, that was kind of the three true outcome sort of take on it. If Indiana lost to Michigan on Wednesday, they would go on the road in the first round. If they beat Michigan, which they did, that secured the first round home. And then, if Indiana beats Penn State on Sunday, national seed probably is on the way. So that was kind of the three true, and kind of in the middle of that right now.
That's crazy. I mean, back late September when we're sitting here, that almost seemed impossible. Just with the way that the season looked. Like, obviously it was possible because there was so much season left, but the way they were playing, it just didn't seem like that was the direction of the season.
I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't say that there was total doubt. It was just something that kind of had to be proven. I don't know, because I think it was after the Michigan match that's where I kind of wrote that column about Indiana coming back, just based on historical results. But yeah, I mean, I guess it was kind of a shot in the dark just because, you know, kind of what you're saying. They were trending at least away from the NCAA tournament, but the attack was sort of producing too many shots that it seemed like kind of hard to believe that they wouldn't turn it around. And now, as I've said, 12 goals in the past 4 matches.
And I think somebody who's, at least from the Michigan match, kind of went, I'd say, a little quiet was Carson Henderlong. And you say that from the standpoint of when he got his first 4 starts, over that span, he scored 3 goals. Obviously, you can't keep up that pace forever. But Indiana, I think, on Sunday, if he's involved too, then I think there's a real possibility that they beat Penn State. And I'm cynical when it comes to these sort of things, especially as an outsider, someone who hasn't really been analytical about soccer until this year. It's so hard to turn a season around and then keep going. And that's another testament to IU's experience. But Henderlong's another veteran. You usually see him come in off the bench or in like 20, 25-minute spells. If Indiana's able to get him involved and then still have pressure from Malun Gumbali and Tommy Mahalik, then I think there's a chance Penn State may even be overwhelmed. The more pieces Indiana can get going against Penn State, the better off they'll be. And I want to see maybe Indiana get Henderlong a little bit more involved, considering how integral he was to them turning it around and going on that run that started in October.
Yeah, there are a handful of guys outside of Mangione on Penn State that can score. I mean, Van Danielson is 4 goals on the year, and he's been a guy off the bench, and that's huge. That's like your super sub player to be able to get 4 goals coming off the bench like that. But I think Indiana right now has more depth in their goal scorers, and because of the way that Malun and Tommy have now had this emergence in the last 4 games.
Yeah, and Nick, to your point, I mean, I definitely kind of see what you're saying, but I also don't necessarily see any downsides at this point in the season for players not really scoring lately. It kind of seems like the story of this season is, how does Indiana get these players involved? And obviously that was a storyline with Carson, but it almost seems like once Indiana players have started to build some confidence that it's just sort of adding people onto the ship. I mean, you have Sarver, that's, I guess, the captain steering it. He's been consistent all season long, but it seems like Carson has now got the confidence. Hugo's got the confidence. You can add him there. And I guess since the Trine match, you can add Mahalik, you can add Gumbali. I think with this team, it's not necessarily players going hot and cold. It was just kind of like, when would players get their confidence? But since they have, now it seems like there's almost so many scoring options. I mean, Carson almost scored last night, and one of Michigan's defenders made that exceptional play of booting it out right on the goal line. So, I mean, that's kind of where I'm at right now, where you're only just adding to the players that can really help you. And I think that was big in Indiana's run to the national championship last year, was that, you had your typical goal scorers with Wittenbrink and stuff like that, but there was also kind of those like obscure matches, like a UNC Greensboro kind of match where I think Gumbali scored as well.
That's what
like Patrick McDonald scored in the national championship. Like, it's maybe not the typical guys like Wittenbrink and like Endley that like you would think in that national championship run, but it just seemed like there was guys that last season were gaining confidence and they just sort of formed this group, and now Indiana's really solidifying that group this season. I think that just because players haven't scored recently, that they still have the capability.
Yeagley said that that UNC Greensboro game was the coming out game for Malone, where that was where he kind of found his form heading into that deep NCAA tournament run, and it just looks like around this time of year again, he's finding that spot and being one of the more experienced guys on the attack, definitely the most experienced on the attack, but one of the more experienced on the team. That's huge.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes all it takes is just to see one go in. And Malone and Tommy both scored in that Trine match, saw their first go in. Now they've just sort of taken off. I mean, Tommy has 2 goals in that span. Gumbali has 4, but it almost seems like Tommy's just looks way more comfortable and way more confident out there. I mean, sure, that one right in front of in sort of the 6-yard box hit the bar, but there's kind of a different feel to when Tommy's out there. I guess maybe a little bit less hesitation or whatever it may be, but Tommy definitely looks a lot more confident.
Yeah, I think I'm thinking about this in terms of baseball, where if you have a ton of really good hitters, then they kind of protect each other in the lineup, because you think about it where you can game plan around one guy, say intentionally walk him in baseball, shut him down, take the bat out of his hands. But with IU, you can't game plan around one guy and double team, for example, Sam Sarver, because they've got so many other guys now who can beat you, and that's that threat. So yeah, I think that's a valid point. I wasn't necessarily harping on Henderlong being hot and cold, because obviously, like I said, it's impossible to keep up that rate of scoring, and he did have a really, really good look last night. And if IU, if they get all those guys involved, it's impossible to figure out who to concentrate on if you're Penn State.
Mahalik said it well last night. He said he did a good job kind of keeping his head down. He knows this season hasn't been the one necessarily goal-wise in the statistics that he expected, but he kind of has put the bad games out of his mind, and he's continued to kind of keep his head down. And it certainly makes Todd Yeagley's job a bit more difficult in terms of the starting 11, which we kind of thought during that 4-game win streak it was kind of settled that Henderlong would be starting up top. But last night, only 38 minutes for him. Mahalik, 68 minutes. He had much more of an impact. It's kind of now, with Malone being in good form, you can't sit him on the bench considering he can play everywhere. Bacharach, obviously, is now, it's a guy you just pencil in every day, to use a baseball term, in the midfield. And now it's just kind of, who do you kind of leave out? If Mahalik is going to start, then does Henderlong come out? Kind of how else does it work? Because we know what Sarver can do. Collins Aduro has looked much better as of late. Even last night, Clay Mirador had fired off a decent-looking shot at one point, I'm pretty sure, in the match. So it's just kind of where do you go now from here? And Yeah, I mean, at the back, nothing's going to change, even with that penalty call last night, which was very interesting. The one that Michigan kind of allowed them back into the match, where there was initially not in the box, then they said it was in the box, and Todd Daly not very happy about that, but so kind of allowed Michigan to get back into it. So for me, it's interesting to see, does Mahalik start up top, and Henderlong, who's kind of had that one stretch, as we mentioned, in the middle during that first part of the win streak, but does he kind of stay on? And you talk about just the implications. Penn State's playing for the lives here. This is obviously, if they win, they're automatically in the tournament. But if they lose, it feels like they're
like right on the brink.
They are
now.
right there. It's truly a season on the brink. To use an IU basketball term.
I think they would need some help from other teams that are also on that bubble to lose. If they were to lose, it'd have to be a 1-goal loss, and then some other teams would have to lose in some convincing fashion.
I think that Penn State's in regardless. There just doesn't seem to be a way.
Their resume doesn't have much though.
I know,
but Northwestern win.
They drew a
Syracuse. But I think we're getting to the part of the season where like RPI numbers don't really matter. It's almost like, I don't know, just kind of like, I don't want to say committee bias, but it's kind of like if you're the committee and you're sitting there and Penn State's on the bubble, like, I don't know, it seems really absurd for there only to be one Big Ten team.
Especially if you're going to give the Big Ten team a national seed. I do understand that point.
Like there's Indiana. Like it just seems really strange that the committee would sit there and be like, Indiana's the only Big Ten team to get in, and like sure, like Northwestern had good I mean, Northwestern, Michigan State, both those teams had good seasons. Not good enough to get into the tournament, but you know, I mean, I guess there's some merit to the conference in that regard. I don't think there's a way that the committee just sits there, drafts it up, and says yes, Indiana's a national seed. And they're the only Big Ten team, and it's like Penn State could be the 48th team if you're going to rank them 1 to 48. But it just seems like Penn State's going to get in, especially with that bias of just kind of like watching how games play out. Like if Penn State hangs with Indiana and this is like a down to the wire finish, like that on paper it's going to be a Penn State loss, but you know, again, it'll kind of help them with the committee, but. To what you were saying earlier, I think if you're Yeagley, I don't think you change anything right now. I think against Michigan, only Sarver and Aduro swap sides, but there hasn't really been many pulling and, swapping of guys from the bench to the starting lineup. Tommy Mahalik last year in the postseason, he was a 25-minute super sub. He would come on in the 25th minute in the College Cup. And of course, as we were kind of saying earlier, that it seems like Carson now has the confidence to be able to score any time, almost did against Michigan. I think if it's working, this isn't really the time to tweak. There's been a lot of tweaking before. Obviously, Yeagley has said that players have played in multiple positions, so it's not the most foreign thing to mix people around. But I think just for being sort of kind of the comfortable factor, this team's rolling, and I don't know if you change anything.
Well, yeah, I mean, through September, they were switching around formation, starting lineup left and right, and just no results were really coming from that. And they've settled into the current one that they have with Bachrach, Patty, and then once Malone was implemented with Henderlong up top, that opened up just a whole new realm of the possibilities. I think I want to see Henderlong remain as the starting striker along Goumbali because I think that is great balance. Henderlong's a big, strong striker who's not afraid to rip it from deep, and then Goumbali's quick. He's going to be able to get around guys, use his dribble a little more. I think if you start Mahalik up top, that's not where he's going to be his best. And that's when it comes to you start Mahalik over Oduro because personally, Mahalik has been more of an impact lately. However, if Mahalik were to start over, then you have Sarver Mahalik. That's a great duo on the wings. Once it comes to the bench unit, though, Oduro doesn't have that factor quite yet to be able to kind of take over things, where Mahalik has proven that he can. And especially off the bench, where you already have a guy like Sam Sarver, and now Malone Goumbali is starting to be that guy. There's so much more depth and different angles that defensively teams are really going to struggle against when you have a guy who's only playing for 40 minutes, who's able to do things that the guys playing for 90 can do.
Is it prediction time?
Yeah, why not?
Go ahead.
Have we reached that point? All right. So,
Actually, wait, hang on.
Okay.
Something just popped in my
Matt,
mind.
First of the half. Do it live. 30-second timeout.
Something that popped in my mind is that Gumbali's first goal last night kind of looked like vintage Wittenbrink there.
Yeah.
I just kind of thought about it with him. I mean,
good shot.
I guess Gumbali didn't necessarily cut there. I think he kind of received more of a pass, but just take a few dribbles, run along the box, and strike it low. So
I think
just wanted to say that.
they were targeting that
Just
lower
for like whatever that word is, nostalgia's sake, I guess.
That was something we should have asked. They targeted the left corner, the lower left corner, on 3 of their 4 goals, or maybe even all 4. The
last one was the right.
It was the right side.
Well, I think it also depends on side because Gumbali was on that side. So I mean, I guess it wouldn't really.
Oh no, that last one was on the first 3 were on the left side though. I noticed it, and all of them Goldson got a freaking hand on, too.
Yeah,
it was close to a lot of it. Let's not forget.
Props to the freshman, man. He was having a. Like, he's a great keeper, but wow, his defense was not picking up the slack, allowing shots to be ripped like that.
Yeah, and
Pendelong almost had one too last night.
No, yeah,
almost went across the line.
But I mean, Goldson during the regular season was so in form. I mean, it was just like a streak of Indiana just catching so many informed keepers. I wouldn't say that Goldson was as informed last night, but. Yeah, I mean, that was crazy. I mean, 2 of Indiana's shots in September hit the bar. Goldson made, I think, like 3 outstanding grabs. But I guess didn't really look as poised last night.
All right, now is the prediction time. We always tell ourselves that.
We'll
do absolutely go on the ramble.
Yeah.
Who starts?
You got it.
I'll start. I said Indiana would lose to Michigan in the semis. So before the tournament started. So
Bad take.
I went 4 for 4, and I said Penn State would win it all. So my champion is still alive.
Just trying to rile you up, and it worked.
It works every time. You got it, Matt. You know how to get under my skin. Congratulations. Indiana wins 3-1. I'll say it. They lost 3-1 last year to Rutgers. They have too much momentum right now. They know how to beat Penn State. I don't think there's the sense of revenge on Penn State from what happened 2 years ago, considering Indiana got them last year in the tournament. I don't think there's that factor, but I think if Indiana can stop Mangione, I mean, that one goal that Penn State scored in that match was a kind of a crazy ball over the top, miscommunication at the back, and Mangione had a free volley into the back of the net. So I think Indiana gets the better of Penn State, wins 3-1, earns the double, and then gets the double bye.
I'm just going to fire this off and then throw my headset across the room and walk out.
Here we go.
I guess a bit dramatic, but 1-1 tie in regulation. Penn State wins it in penalty kicks. I don't know why. It's just kind of has that feel. Maybe it's the history with Penn State a few years ago with the penalty kicks, or Penn State. Penn State also just playing penalty kicks against Ohio State as well. But I don't know. It just seems like that. It's just going to be 2 teams. They've met each other during the season. I think it's just going to be a little bit of a stalemate there. But not a high-scoring stalemate, a sort of low-scoring stalemate. And then I think it's just going to go to penalties. I think the overtime is just going to be drawn out into penalties, and it's going to be like a 4-3.
That's what the score was last night in the semifinal.
Yeah, like a 4-3 or like 5-4 penalty shootout. Just like something like that.
Penn State. So Matt has Penn State putting the emphasis on the pen.
Yeah. What, do you have a final score of the Pens though?
He just said 4-3.
I was not at all.
Unbelievable.
4-3 or 5-4. It's going to be a high-scoring shootout.
It's going to throw your headset at you, Cronin.
Yeah.
You're next, pal.
Okay. If I'm Indiana, I'm sending Hugo Bachrach and man-marking Mangione the entire game until, just take him out completely. Not, make him a null factor. Force the other Nittany Lions to make a play because this is a guy who leads the Big Ten in points. He was the Big Ten Offensive Player of the Year, had 10 goals on the season. So why would you not try and make him a null factor in this game? And especially a guy like Bachrach, when you're 6'4", you're mobile. That's a tough guy to get around. Oh, it's going to be tough. I liked Platt's prediction of 3-1 just because of the scoring that has been going on this season. I think Indiana comes on top. they check box number 2 in a 2-1 victory. Pretty much, similar feel to that first one. Hugo Bachrach's going to probably have a big game if they follow to my defensive game plan.
Coach Cronin's got his game plan. I've got my narratives. Penn State, at least per the IU Athletics page, has not beaten IU in Bloomington since 2014.
In the tournament or overall?
I think overall, but I could be wrong. Looking at just what the Athletics page says, Penn State has not won in Bloomington in almost 10 years. For the sake of narratives, I say that stays. IU's 25-2 at home against Penn State all time. I think IU wins. I think it's very close defensively. I'm going to say 1-0 IU, just because Penn State's defense is so good. And I think at some point, you're not going to score 4 goals every match. I think it's going to be extremely close, extremely physical. The student section is going to have a huge influence on this match, and I think that's the thing that gives them the edge.
I'm going to throw another narrative in there just quickly, I guess just for fun. I don't know. I guess if there is anything to show for balance, then, Indiana, settled for 2 frustrating draws against Wisconsin and Michigan. Both those teams helped Indiana to win, or I guess share the Big Ten tournament. Share the Big Ten regular season title on decision day. So Indiana said thank you very much, and then beat both those teams in the Big Ten tournament to end their seasons. And I don't know, and to kick off this late season run was Penn State on the road. So I don't know. I just seem like in terms of balance like that, maybe it's Indiana's turn for that. Where Penn State comes back and gets Indiana on the road. So. There's definitely that narrative there. I guess to throw a balancing narrative, I guess there's one right there. So
yeah, no, and you have, Penn State's got all 4 of the 5 Big Ten postseason awards, and they on paper, just looking at, if you don't look at IU's recent trend, Penn State is this is their game to lose, and they've got way more to lose from it if Indiana does win. If IU wins, it doesn't change. It might not change a whole lot. The magnitude, though, for Penn State is much higher.
And something I forgot to include there is that with Indiana beating Penn State on the road, that's how, Indiana got the number 1 seed to host throughout the tournament. So that's what I kind of meant in terms of, it being Indiana's turn where they're sort of benefiting from Penn State and then maybe ends their season, so benefits from 3 teams in the Big Ten and then ends their season all in the Big Ten tournament. I still think that Penn State would get in, but you know what I'm saying. So
cool. There's a lot of storylines at play here. I think Penn State's got just 2 wins away from home this season, but they've got 8 at home.
Yeah. There's a lot of altering stuff, but yeah. Oh, I promise to get a haircut soon, Mom, by the way.
Wow.
I've been trying to get them. Unfortunately, I've scheduled.
Let's get a haircut over Thanksgiving.
No.
break.
I scheduled.
Yeah, you have to wait till Thanksgiving.
I scheduled 2 haircuts, and unfortunately, the barber wasn't able to come in that day. I scheduled it, and then it was canceled twice. So I'm trying. I
got a pair of clippers. I'll get you right.
I was trying to hide my hair before Thanksgiving.
The Joe Cronin haircut, that would be an experience.
The Cronin fade.
Yeah, jeez.
I'm getting you waves.
Say less.
I need a hat for this
my
podcast.
sister texted me today. She's like, I need a haircut too.
To cover this up. I need a Q49 hat.
Well, I think we should probably cover up this podcast and put a lid on it and wrap things up.
Always ends this way where we're just off the walls. I'm standing up, but
adios. We'll talk to you next time on the Q49 Podcast.